we are live by the look of it. Well, I hope it is. Just had a funny thing crop up on the screen there, testing the broadcast. So here's hoping. It says 0 in the chat at the moment, but I'm sure there will be some people through the door shortly. It does seem to take a little bit to refresh, but if you're in the building, do drop a comment so I can just see if this is actually working. First live stream for the year. Thank you for joining one and all. If you're listening on archive, apologies for the sort of stutter start here, just making sure we're actually up and running. Okay, so we've got Scott in the building. He says hi. Hello back to you. So it is up and running, just seems to be a little bit delayed, and actually, okay, now we've got 7 in the chat. It's updated. So first live stream for 2020. It's one of those things that the longer I leave it not doing it on a Friday, the easier it was to leave it because other things were sort of cropping up. You know, there was the holidays, Christmas, and then I went away for a couple of weeks, and then a few different bits and pieces, family visiting, and but we're back. It's the main thing. So hello to Kim, to True, Epirami. So I've just completely butchered that your name there, so apologies for that. Salty Sally in the building. So a couple of things that I've got on my list. So first, show back for 2020. We'll try to keep it between 30 minutes to an hour, just nice and leisurely. I always say that sort of thing, but it ends up sort of blowing out to like 2 hours. But we'll see. I'll see if I can keep it on track. Obviously, the big one this weekend, Wilder Fury. We'll talk about that. Get your picks. Who wins? How? We'll talk about the Nevada State Athletic Commission banning the final face. A lot of coverage in spots. Seems like there's been pockets of hype. I'm not convinced it does the 2 million Bob Arum says, but we'll talk about it. A couple of other things on my list. Ortiz and Ruiz, that's a potential fight that could get made. Joshua and Pulev seem set to be announced next week. White and Wilder, they've been beefing again. No surprise. It actually kind of gets a bit tiring. Also, another belt on the line for Joyce and Dubois, and Joyce stepping up his trash talk, and we'll just see what comes up in the chat as well. So welcome one and all. So we'll crack into it. First thing, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, February the 22nd, MGM Grand Arena, Las Vegas. It feels like it's only been announced like a week or two ago, and it's already here. It really has crept up quite quickly. Maybe it's just that time of the year, and there really hasn't been too much in the way of big-time boxing on at this time of year. There's been a few fights, but often it hasn't necessarily been anything approaching a big fight like this one. So this is the first really big fight for the year, and it's can't come, quick enough given the schedule's been so light. I think in January, for the heavyweight division at least, it was just a ghost, a ghost yard. There really wasn't anything really happening in the month of January. But it was strange because there was a lot of news around, just not a lot of fights. So in terms of the actual content for the channel, there's been heaps around and heaps of, back and forth. And obviously there was the Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce fight announced for April. Whole sort of number of things that have cropped up, but nothing really to sort of preview week to week in terms of the upcoming week in a fight and that sort of thing. A few lower level fights, and say this weekend as well, apart from the Wilder and Fury fight. You've got Daniel Martz taking on Simon Keane in Canada. There's the odd other fight, but it's been pretty light, that's for sure. So L-Dog in the super chat there with $20. Appreciate that. So he says, welcome back. Absolutely gutted at the EBU completely robbing Hrgovic of a shot at the title. And actually, because you've raised it, I'll talk about that first, but I'll just quickly get to a couple of other comments in the chat just so we catch up. L-Dogs, so this is further up, says, well, the man is back. Yeah, it sort of has taken a while, but like I was saying earlier on, it's just the longer I've left it, the easier it was not to, sort of get back into it. And often that can happen with making videos too. If you take a day off, or 2 to 3 days off just to have a break, by the 4th day, it can be super hard to really get motivated unless there's something really big to sort of get your teeth into. Consistency is one of those things that YouTube loves in terms of uploads, but in terms of doing at least a video a day or most days of the week, it is one of those things that you just get in that pattern and the habit of doing. It's kind of like going to the gym. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, if that makes any sense. So we've got Manu Man 666, big up Boxing Squid, best in the game. Appreciate that. We've got True saying from Wales, West Wales. Jay Shine, salute Boxing Squid, listening from Houston, Texas. Wilder with the KO. I'm going with Wilder too as well. We'll talk about that a bit later. We've got Kurt in the chat. G'day. That no face-off is a test to see if that tactic generates publicity. Maybe. Well, I think, yeah, and I raised that in my video too, and by not having it, it will raise some publicity because obviously it's one of those sort of final elements of a weigh-in or a press conference, that sort of thing. So True says, screw Vegas, don't have the trilogy fight there. Well, I think for the trilogy fight, depending on what happens with the second fight, depending on who wins it, how much money they can make and generate, that'll all factor into where it ends up going. Because if they end up getting some sort of offer from Saudi Arabia or some other far-flung part of the world, they will absolutely go for the money if they think they can make more overall. It's a business after all. But to L-Dog's comment there for his super chat where he raised the Hrgovic point, that was really interesting. The EBU coming in behind the Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce fight, putting up the EBU title. And if you hadn't caught that video, I've got more background in there. But essentially, Joe Joyce and Hrgovic were ordered to fight. And generally, the guy that walks away from the fight isn't considered to be fighting for the title. But in this case, it's not Hrgovic going to be fighting for the title versus, say, another challenger. It's being put on the line for Joyce and Dubois. And I think Uncle Frank's probably been in behind the scenes trying to keep this whole every belt situation going on. I think he probably wants to, skip off or tick off, I should say, off the list, that belt for Daniel Dubois, because it's getting to the point where he's almost going to get past that point and shoot past it if he doesn't sort of try to pick it up now. So I was a little surprised that it wasn't, Hrgovic going to be facing someone else for it, but the EBU clipping the ticket, getting some sanctioning fees, and it probably didn't take too much convincing for them to put that on the line. But there's like a whole screed of belts on the line there. I think it's like the Commonwealth, the English, the British, now the EBU, there's the WBO belts. There's a whole stack of them, about 6 or 7 of them. And I think Joe Joyce is bringing one to the party, which is the WBA gold title. But that wasn't on the Frank Warren press release on his website. So maybe that's on the line, maybe it's not. Not 100% sure on that. But back to the chat here. So Nesta says hello from Houston. So I've got a couple of people from Houston in the building. Hello to one and all, wherever you are in the world, morning, noon or night. Hope you're having a good day, good evening, good afternoon. I'm about half an hour late to launch this first live stream because I've been going out sort of walking in the evenings trying to get 10,000 steps and get my fitness up a bit. It's about 7 kilometers, 10,000 steps. But I sort of took a punt and the weather was a little bit dicey and it started pouring on me while I was out there. So I had to stop a few times and sort of take shelter and my cheap $20 headphones, because what I do is I end up going out on these walks and listening to longer boxing podcasts. So I've been listening to quite a bit of mixed combat radio, because the sort of loop that I do is about an hour or so, and it's about 6K, something like that. And so I've been listening for some longer podcasts, because obviously you can just sort of get lost in it as you walk along. But I'm sort of off track here. I'll get back to the chat here and then on to the next topic. So Kim says he's walking to the gym just as you said that. L-Dog says smash that like button. Yes, please. Pro Boxing Legends, been listening a while. Always appreciated your well-structured and informative comments. Appreciate that. Thank you for joining the live stream. We will. This is the first one back for 2020. We will crack on and get it back as a regular thing. Hopefully, at least 3 out of 4 Fridays in New Zealand time, because I try to do it about 9:30ish on a Friday night my time, which is, I think, it's pretty early in the States. But it's sort of afternoon, evening in Australia and Asia, and early morning or early-ish morning in the UK. So it's no real good time in New Zealand to do some of these things, except if you're a boxing fan in New Zealand, the good thing is, doesn't matter if it's the UK or the US on Sundays. It's either in the morning or the afternoon. So I don't. That's I've gotten used to watching boxing like that. But I'm rambling, so I'll crack on here. So getting back to the chat here. So to Quavius Johnson, apologies if I butchered that. Says salute Boxing Squid. Hello to you too. Levi says, why Eddie Hearn giving Parker such rubbish fights? See, I know that there's been a few people turning on Eddie Hearn for this, but I sort of look at it as, he did give him the Chisora fight. It wasn't Hearn's fault that Parker got bitten by a spider, and presumably not Parker's fault either. But it kind of, I think we're all getting a little bit tired of the tune-ups, because this is the third tune-up in a row. You had Flores, then you had Leapai, and now you've got Winters. And I think a few people might be a little bit overlooking Winters in terms of his ability and durability. I don't mean in terms of winning the fight, because Parker's going to win it, but I think Winters will give a better account of himself than some people expect. So I'm fully expecting, if it goes, say, it's a 10-rounder, and if it goes 6, 7, 8, or even the full distance, there's going to be a whole bunch of people out there saying that Joseph Parker's a bum and, he should retire and all that sort of nonsense. But at least if he does get some rounds in, the positive from that is that he'll be better for it, given it's been 8 months, 9 months since his last fight against Leapai, which previously, before that, it was December of 2018. But when you think about it, by the time he gets into a real fight, Joseph Parker, it would have been almost 2 years since since a tough fight that he's been in. So hopefully Hearn can set him up for something decent in his third and final fight on his contract. Otherwise, Parker might not sign with him again. It's just kind of that simple, I guess. So Fear's Edge says, does anyone know why Wilder's brother always has that backpack on? Just wondering, it looked weird. Yeah, I've always thought that as well. Jerry, actually someone said that doesn't look like that wasn't his brother. And I know it's definitely not Marcellus Wilder, because he's different, but I thought Deontay Wilder had another brother, and it was that guy. And I've heard that guy before when someone's put hands on Deontay Wilder. Maybe it was back in the 2018 Tyson Fury, one of those events. I think it was, and he said, don't put your hands on my brother. So if anyone can inform us if in fact what his name is, I'd be quite interested. I actually did Google who is Deontay Wilder's brother, and all I could get was the Marcellus Wilder, but I was kind of expecting that would come up. So Jerry says, what's your opinion of the undercard of Wilder vs Fury 2? It's pretty thin. I mean, I like that there's a heavyweight fight on the pay-per-view card, but I'm realistic to think that Charles Martin and Gerald Washington is not co-main event sort of material. I mean, there's an IBF eliminator on the line, but that doesn't necessarily justify it being the co-main. But overall, it's pretty thin, and clearly the bulk of the money is going to Wilder and Fury. So they've got a minimum of $5 million that was reported by Dan Rafael via the Nevada State Athletic Commission. But reportedly, and this is in the same report, they're going to be getting $25 million, and plus any upside from the pay-per-view. So they're going to need to sell a lot of sort of pay-per-view units here. So True says Wilder won't fight outside the US MSG next time, I reckon. Well, they might move it around. It really depends on the money, the site fees. They did the first one in LA, the second one's in Vegas. So New York, that is a logical next one. It depends if they can actually get someone to pony up some cash. Because if, say, the Saudis, for example, they liked what they saw in the second fight, there was a third one and they came in with a $50 million site fee. It's hard to turn that down. So Kurt says it's a good contest for the Euro belt. It is, yeah, Dubois and Joyce. I mean, I think some people are overlooking how competitive Joyce might be in this fight. It's pretty close to a 50-50 in my view. And I did note, and I covered this off in my heavyweight news mashup video, Joyce in Vegas, and this was via some tweets by Mike Coppinger, posting that Joyce has been training with Patrick Mailata. So he's a fellow New Zealander. He's only had a couple of fights under his belt, but Very talented guy. Just the knock on him is he just comes in far too heavy. So if he can get down to more like 265 or something like that instead of being up at 285, 290, he could be a handful. He's a young guy. He got a bronze medal, I think it was at the Commonwealth Games a year or two ago. Not a lot of people know his name at the moment, but in a year or two he'll probably be knocking on the door of Joseph Parker in terms of his ability, and potentially down the line they could even fight. I don't know. There's always been the talk of Junior Fa and Joseph Parker fighting because they fought in the amateurs, but so too did Patrick Mailata. He had a few rounds with Joseph Parker at some point. This is obviously going back years and years and years, but apparently quite competitive. So Right Hook Boxing in the chat here. Hello to you. And if you haven't followed Right Hook Boxing, he's got his own channel. Great stuff as well. He does a mix of different boxing topics. Definitely recommend. So Gigi Allen says, Fair's Edge, apparently he wears it in the backpack everywhere, including around in his own house. Jay Shine says, the no face-off is so Fury can hide that cut. That's why he's been wearing glasses. Fury don't want Wilder to see how bad it is. It won't work. Wilder gonna cut it open. Yeah, I don't know if it's... I mean, Fury was at the Grand Arrivals. He didn't have glasses on. Actually, I'll just check my folder. He certainly had some eyewear on today, but I wouldn't have thought he's been doing any sparring of late. So just bear with me a second. So Grand Arrivals just from the other day. Yeah, Fury is... I've got some close-ups of him and his eyebrow, and, round where the cut is. It doesn't look like it's been opened up anytime soon, but they've been taking, a lot of precautions with it. Not really... they've been tailoring the sparring so he wouldn't get clipped in the head. But doesn't mean it's not going to get opened up the first time that it gets hit on fight night. And that really could be something that changes the fight on a dime, because... those cuts, if they one or both open up, if Deontay Wilder can manage to get a few jabs in there or even a right hand open it up, you might see Fury just flip the switch and just go for broke, thinking, I'm not going to be able to last against... because he was saying against Otto Warren, he was struggling to see, he felt he was effectively one-eyed for most of that fight. And against a guy like Wilder with his right hand, even his left hook, especially the left hook, because Fury wouldn't be able to see that coming out of that right eye. You wouldn't want to be on the end of one of Deontay Wilder's power punches if you didn't see it coming, because that's when a knockout occurs. So L-Dog says, hit the like and drop a super chat to show support. Kurt says, Wilder's brother is a knob. True says, Jay Shine, his eye is fine, saw it backstage. More mind games. Yeah, it could be. And one of the questions I guess I have is, and I was planning to do a video, this is tonight, but then the whole thing about what am I trying to say here, the Nevada State Athletic Commission, the final face-off being cut off. One of the questions that I was going to raise, and sort of a few questions that left unanswered, is who's won the mental battle in this build-up? Because at times I've sort of thought it's been a bit sort of pedestrian in terms of the sort of jibes and the back and forth, and it was been a little bit sort of low-key and circumspect compared to the first fight. But the second, but towards, as we get towards fight night, there's been a bit more action, and obviously this week with the pressure, and there was a couple of moments where Deontay Wilder sort of put it on Tyson Fury verbally, and Fury didn't really respond. And I know some people have said that Deontay Wilder is, got the sort of edge off that, and he was able to momentarily sort of shut Fury up, and that could be a bonus for him, at least maybe in his own confidence levels. But then, there's the other side of me that thinks, is Fury sort of, letting Wilder sort of get a couple of, things away, a couple of shots at him, and trying to draw him in, because, he's all about mind games. And part of the thing about injuries, remembering this whole thing with the talk of an ankle injury and other bits and pieces that's emerged in the last few days, it wouldn't surprise me if that was put out by Tyson Fury himself, trying to, throw a little bit of doubt in there. And we are soon going to see with that anyway on fight night, because if there's an ankle issue, which we haven't seen really any evidence of it in the sort of the walking around that he's been doing in Fight Week. But it would sort of soon show up after, within the first few rounds on fight night. But also the rumor of a bad camp. Wouldn't surprise me if Fury and his team has sort of seeded that out there as well, that Eddie Hearn's been fed that to get out to the public, and then it sort of throws a little bit of doubt there. I mean, maybe Tyson Fury's been mounting a campaign to help get Deontay Wilder overconfident, remembering that Wilder and his team said that they're not doing anything different for this camp, they're just doing it better. But I think Deontay Wilder certainly has been more relaxed, and he has seemed confident, but not like overconfident. I think Fury wants him to be overconfident, and he wants him to be a bit wild and ragged. He wants to get under his skin. But I'm not so sure if it's been a complete sort of success on that front. And I think Wilder knows he has to keep it buttoned up if he's going to actually have a shot of, getting Fury out of there. Because if he swings, for the fences like he did in the first fight and misses for several rounds, Fury would have made some adjustments from that first fight. But I think Wilder will be more disciplined. He's going to be more patient. I think we're going to see more of the Luis Ortiz version of Deontay Wilder, where he wasn't throwing as many punches, he was waiting for his opportunity. In that first fight, he was the one that was the aggressor against Tyson Fury for a decent chunk of the fight. Not always. And there is a case to be made that Tyson Fury, when he did actually sort of come forward, having Deontay Wilder sort of on the back foot, sort of working in close, tucking up, that Fury was having a lot of success. But it's one of these things, both these guys, and I think Deontay Wilder's underrated for it, they both manage range well. They both can fight really well from the outside. But obviously we saw in that first fight, when Tyson Fury had a couple of lapses, Wilder put him down. And that could happen again. And this is what I really like about this fight. The formula is so similar to the first fight. It could really just go the same way. The same thing could happen. That we could see a couple of knockdowns, people on the deck, but ultimately Fury picking up a lot of rounds, maybe enough to win. Hopefully, though, we don't see a draw. But I'll just get back to the chat here, and if you want to let me know, and I'll probably get to it in a couple of minutes when I catch up on the chat, who's going to win and how. I did the poll on Twitter, about 370 votes or so. Fury had 55% of the vote. Wilder was almost 39%, and there's about 7% or so for the draw, or was it 5.7 for the draw? So hopefully the draw doesn't come into it, because that, we've been looking for resolution. And one of the things that's been happening, at least I've thought about it in the build-up here, is because there's been this whole wait, did that kill a little bit of the buzz, the anticipation for the rematch? Because there's been a few indicators, at least for me, that, I was always going to see this as a massive fight. If you're listening to the stream, you were looking forward to seeing this fight. It's a big fight. Hardcore boxing fans and fans of both of these fighters really think this is a massive fight. But is it resonating outside of, the boxing sort of clique? It's hard to say. A couple of the indicators that I go by haven't necessarily been going off. Generally for big fights, for preview coverage, I'll get a bit of a bump in views and that sort of stuff. Hasn't really happened this time around for the coverage that I've done for this fight. But also I use a barometer of family and friends. If they know about a fight and they're talking about a big fight, then I know it's, sort of penetrating a bit further into the sort of casual sports fan, or even just the broader public. Not so much. I haven't had friends who've talked about fights before talking about this one. So, yeah, I mean, the targeting of the promotion has clearly, obviously, been a big push in the United States, and BT seems to have done a great job in the UK too. So maybe the international pay-per-view, maybe it's been something that hasn't been a lot of thought towards pushing it out further afield from UK, US, but yeah, it'll be interesting, the pay-per-view itself, what the number will be. The first time around, 325, 330,000. Will it be able to double it? 500,000, 600,000, 700,000, 2 million, as Bob Arum predicts. I think that's optimistic. Even 1 million, if they were to get something approaching 1 million pay-per-view buyers in this market, that's massive. So yeah, leave your thoughts on that. I'll just keep coming down the chat here. Sort of lost my place. I'll just get back to it. So 57 in the chat. Welcome one and all. Jeez, I got really behind the chat here. Always happens. Go off on a bit of a wander while I'm chatting here, and all of a sudden I get well behind. Okay. So Gigi Allen says the winner of Fury Wilder 2 should fight Lucas Brown. Wow. Someone put him on a timeout for that. That's outrageous. So Right Hook Boxing says just come from the heavyweight mashup, and you probably just heard me talking about a couple of things I had in that video, so appreciate that, Right Hook Boxing. So Siddharath Kumar, watching from New Zealand, your vids are great. Thank you for coming to the channel, appreciate that, Siddharath. Jay Shine, True 22, you could be right. I don't think so though, just my opinion. Well, the cuts issue is going to play a part, because in this fight, I believe, I think at some point a punch is going to land. I mean, he's obviously got Stitch Duran in there as one of the best cutmen in the game. It'll be interesting to see if it does open, just how that changes and affects the fight. Because if it happens early, clearly that's an advantage to Deontay Wilder. But if it happens later in the fight, well, maybe Fury will be able to sort of, muddle through. But against a big puncher, and this is a much anticipated rematch, and you've got the potential for a cut to open and bleed profusely as it did in that Wallen fight. Yeah, there's a lot of intrigue, and I'm interested to see what happens with those cuts. And a couple of people haven't, or a lot of people haven't been talking about that as a potential factor in this fight. But yeah, I think it could be up there. Liam says, evening BS, have been hanging out for your live stream. Yeah, it was the first one for the year. It's almost, I think it's been about 2 months since the last one, just before Christmas. It's like I was saying earlier, the longer you leave it, the easier it is not to do it. So I'll try to make it back to a regular Friday thing. So Said Master says, hello Boxing Squared, you've been dropping very hot vids lately. Thank you for the consistency. No worries. I think the content's been good. Yes, it's one of those things though that some of the fighters that I cover in the heavyweight division doesn't always resonate with my sort of broader subscriber base. But I like to do those videos for the breadth of the channel, but there's some really good fights that are out there that are going to be happening that I think that's really interesting to talk about. So Aldog says Winters is a tough guy. He beat Teslenko and some Polish guy. Yeah, that was Sergey Waweko, both who were supposed to lose to. Yeah, Teslenko, that was a really dominant performance by Shondell Winters, and that's sort of why I say that he might come a bit better than advertised, because I think some people are just thinking, oh, there's just this guy who's going to get shredded in half a round. But yeah, I think Winters could go some rounds, but that wouldn't necessarily bode well for Parker's profile, although he'll be better for the rounds. So Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News says, greeting Mr. Squared, very disappointing the lack of a final face-off. The NSAC have gone too far. Yeah, I agree. It's a strange decision. I mean, the whole pushing and shoving at the final press conference, I didn't even think it was that bad. It was, in the scheme of things, compared to other face-offs over the years, pretty tame stuff. Sure, there was a little bit of an edge and a little bit of niggle in there. It was, got a bit spicy for a bit, but it calmed down pretty quickly, and security was in there and it didn't escalate. And these guys aren't going to be sort of banging away at the press conference or the weigh-in. They're here to get paid. They don't work overtime doing it for free. So yeah, it just seems a bit over the top. And remembering these guys get punched in the head for a living, so a bit of pushing and shoving is absolutely nothing. So Ra Hoa says, Wilder's only chance is Kenny Bayless. Expect a PBC premature stoppage, folks. Well, Kenny Bayless probably won't give as much leeway as Jack Reese, so Tyson Fury probably doesn't want to be caught looking like he's knocked out on the ground. So Cash for Cat says, hi Boxing Squared, been missing the live streams. Well, we will try to get them back up and running on a weekly basis. Fair's Edge says, someone called him his brother. Maybe he's some kind of security guy. Kurt says, but he walked this earth like a god. Charles Martin. Yeah, he's never going to live that quote down. I've been slipping it into videos every opportunity that I've had it in the last few weeks when I've talked about Charles Martin. Al Dog says, big ups to Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News. He's also got a really good channel, so if you haven't checked him out, you may remember him as MC Boxing Stars and McGregor Boxing Talk. It's had a couple of iterations of the name of the past couple of years. Gigi Allen says maybe he's a fake brother like Dillian White's fake brother Dean. Yeah, that could be a possibility. So Liam says, I've got Joyce for the win. I definitely think that Joyce is being overlooked by a lot of fans here. He may not, have the speed that some other heavyweights have. He's been accused of throwing a punch and it landing 3 days later, but he throws a lot of those 3 day later punches, so it's hard to sort of, as Jennings found out when he fought him, get your offense away when you're fighting him because he's relentless. So Boxing Squared, what is your prediction, says Cash for Cat. Well, it's the same equation as the first fight. Either Wilder wins by knockout or Fury by decision. That's largely how people saw it last time, largely how people see it this time. But on the balance of probabilities of Wilder already having 12 rounds in the bank, I'm leaning towards Wilder, and I think he will win the fight. But it's one of these things, I don't have a horse in this race. I don't mind who wins. All I want to see is a really good fight. And this is one of the bigger fights for some time. We don't often get, two of the three best heavyweights fighting each other. So I think, we should hope for a good fight, and if it does deliver, well, that's all the better for fans in the sport in general. So True says, never been harder for Wilder's team to turn down money. Never been hard for Wilder's team to turn down money. Kim says, thoughts on Tyson Fury being addicted to the weights room. I understand it's a great tool for him to keep well mentally, but how will it affect his functional movement, slip and slide / box? It's a good question. Yeah, he certainly has looked like he's muscled up a bit, but yeah, we're going to see that. He's 6'9". Maybe he's more like 6'7.5", 6'8", legit 6'9", but 270 on his frame. Yeah, or is it going to be 270 though? We'll know in a matter of hours when they have the weigh-in, because if it's like 260 or 265, I think it's much of a muchness. I think he can carry a little bit of extra weight, and at his size, a little bit of extra muscle, maybe it's not going to affect him too much. He's still going to, a lot of what he does, use his legs a lot. Obviously, very slick upstairs in terms of the movement too. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to have too much of a detriment. He does look a little bit more bulked up in the arms, but he doesn't look super massive or anything like that. We'll see though, because if he looks a bit clunky early on, then obviously we'll be going, hang on, has he done too much in the weight room and become the weightlifter that he's always accused Anthony Joshua of being? So L-Dog says, I've met Mailata in person. Very nice guy. I think he will be a solid heavyweight in the future. Yeah, he's only, about 24 years old. I remember when he had his first fight, it was on a Shane Cameron card here in New Zealand, it was broadcast. It looks very good. Slick, for a big guy. I think he was something like, was it 287 for that fight or 293? And he made some excuses about his weight after the fight, but for a big guy, he was like moving very well. So if he can get his weight down a bit, he's got a lot of silky skills, and I think he can be one of these guys. Maybe in that sort of, maybe Ajit Caballel, a little bit of a similarity to him, just in the way that he can move, but also, I'm just trying to think. He's a very talented fighter. There's sort of 5 New Zealand heavyweights that are sort of on the radar at the moment. Mailata is probably number 4 at the moment, above Toa Luteli, and then you've got Hemia Hio and Junior Fa, who are more advanced. And then obviously Joseph Parker is sort of the number 1 of the heap, but maybe in 5 years' time, if Parker sort of does hold to this retiring by 30-31, Mailata probably ends up being the next guy that becomes the number 1 at some point. Punch Quote says, Joyce is so slow and throws wide punches. Triple D just has to throw straight shots and it's a KO. Easier said than done though, and if I mean, what really interests me for this fight as well is, and I'm leaning towards a Dubois win just slightly, although Joyce is a very live dog in this fight, and I'm a big Joyce fan too, but I think Daniel Dubois, for some of the reasons that you raised there, the straight punches, but I want to see him tested, and this is what Joyce can do here, and I'm not going to be surprised at all if Joyce wins that one. So Right Hook Boxing says still have Dubois to win, but Joyce 10-12, 50-1, and on bet 365. Couldn't believe how high it was. Not that unrealistic at all. Yeah, those are pretty decent odds. So Ra Hoa says, why Wilder demand Jack Reese be dropped after doing such a fine job the first time? Because Reese didn't wave the fight off when Fury was laid out. Bayless will stop the fight on any BS pretext. Hopefully not too quickly, because if this fight gets stopped too soon, then there's going to be controversy dropping out of this fight, and then that actually there's a narrative that starts to get weaved that they're getting a hometown decision, etc., yada yada yada, all that sort of thing. I think Jack Reese the first time, because he said both these guys were champions, I wanted to give him every opportunity to get up and beat the count. So yeah, and he did. And obviously there was a controversy about the count. Jack Reese said, look, it's not 10 seconds, it's a 10 count. It's not one, counting it out on a stop clock. But he got up, and obviously we've got this rematch. They came out with the draw. I still think it would have been better if we had that second fight back in May or whatever it was going to be in 2019. I feel just like a little bit of the buzz just fell out of the little bit of the hype sort of dropped off, but seems like they've been doing a very good job to try, really get it back, and things have been ratcheting up, and especially in fight week. So hopefully it does well. I had a look at the tickets the other day, didn't look like there was many left, but pay-per-view predictions, it's sort of finger in the air stuff. It's hard to call that. So Cash for Cat says, I think we're going to see the best Fury ever. Wilder getting stopped this time. L-Dog says, he's hyped for this fight. This is what boxing is about. 50-50 fights where no outcome would surprise us. Yeah, well said. So Ness Mendoza says, what's good boxing squared? Hello to you too, and I think it came up before that you just subscribed, so I appreciate that. L-Dog says, Right Hook Boxing, solid bet. Yeah, 50-1 on Joyce to win rounds 10-12. That's pretty tempting. Prediction of Martin versus Washington. Yeah, this is another, even though I've said it's not really co-main event material, it's a competitive fight. This is what I like about some of the matchmaking, even though for PBC, even though there's not a lot of bones thrown out to Top Rank or Matchroom or whoever to design to get some fights made, they do make some good competitive in-house fights at PBC. And I like this fight, Martin versus Washington. I'm edging it to Martin. Washington, there's always a question about him and the sort of mental state of mind, and does he sort of crumble under the pressure? And we've seen him have a few brain explosions, like against Adam Kovnatsky. He went in there so confident, said he changed his strategy after the Wilder loss, and he came out and just stood right in front of Adam Kovnatsky, zero head movement, begging to be hit, and he ended up getting starched, and it was no real surprise. So yeah, going for Charles Martin, but it might be an ugly-ish fight. But it wouldn't surprise me if Washington actually lands a couple of punches like he did on Robert Helenius. That was a spectacular knockout against Robert Helenius, and a seesaw battle in which Washington probably was down on the cards. But yeah, he's got a big right hand, and there has been a couple of guys, like Amir Mansour said that Gerald Washington doesn't know what he's got, that he's got probably one of the biggest right hands he's ever sort of faced in boxing. But Washington just didn't really seem to believe in himself or something, and this is that mental edge, and if he gets worn down like he did against Jarrell Miller, he could just wilt and fold all of a sudden. So I'm expecting Martin to come through a tough fight. The pace probably is not going to be a cracking pace. I think it's probably going to suit, Gerald Washington. Martin's not exactly a Jarrell Miller volume type guy, and that's what really ground Washington into the dust. He just couldn't handle it. So Ness says, got Fury by split decision. Yeah, I mean, if it goes to points, I would just assume Fury's going to win it, but I thought that the first time. Lubak says, Kia ora squared, great stream boat. Thank you for joining wherever you are in the world. 62 in the chat. Morning, noon or night, thank you for joining us here on the Boxing Squared live stream. It's been a minute since the last one, a couple of months actually, so just sort of feeling my way back into it. I said I was hoping to go for 30 minutes to an hour to sort of leisurely sort of ease back into it, but we're already at 40, so we'll see how we go. So Isabella Lloyd says, Hrgovic should fight the winner, been robbed of the fight, corruption, Boxing Squared. It's obviously the EBU coming in, taking a payday, wanting to get in on that action. And with all the belts that are on the line, it makes me wonder how much, sanctioning fees are actually being paid. What is there, about 7 belts on the line for that Joyce and Dubois fight, most of them being Dubois' belts. So Lee says, just listen to your vid about a no face-off. A sport where 2 guys box and hurt each other, just say what sport wants, where they push each other. It's so stupid. Yeah, I agree. It's weird. It really is weird. It's uppercut sort of stuff. They need to think. I mean, because they're talking about it. It's not the image that boxing wants, and it's like, is it? I mean, I don't understand where they're coming from. These guys hurt each other for a living. It's a bit different to some of these other combat sports, and let's face it, some of the pay-per-view and their paychecks could be based, a good intense face-off, and if there's a bit of drama at the weigh-in, that could help sell the fight and directly lead to money in pockets. So yeah, I don't know how well they've sort of thought this out. I mean, they've really got the kid gloves out. It's weird. So Wilder owned the press conference, no question, says Jay Shine. Yeah, you got a few digs in, and Fury sort of momentarily sort of wasn't able to say anything. But was that a tactic from Fury to let Wilder get some confidence? I mean, with Tyson Fury, who knows? Lubak, Fury seemed a bit flat and quiet and maybe concussed from sparring. Yeah, maybe he was. Maybe the whole sort of week is catching up with him, because they've had a pretty mad schedule of interviews and other bits and pieces in fight week. Maybe he was caught a bit flat. True says Washington won't be leading with his face like Kovnatsky fight and pick him to stop Martin. Yeah, I could see a stoppage coming. That could actually happen. So Nez Mendoza says, what's good Boxing Squared? What's good with you? GG Allen says, there's no face-to-face at weigh-in, but there will be us-to-face. I should have screened that comment before reading it. Lee Scorpio says, let's just be honest, whatever Fury is doing and how Wilder reacts is exactly what Fury wants. He's a tactician of the mind. Yeah, I agree with that to an extent. Ro Hoa says Wilder by PBC stoppage. Lubak says Washington is the better boxer, though a glass chin. Wilder have slow hands than Fury, says Nez Mendoza. So AB says Phil from Oz coming late. Not sure what that's about. AZ says Fury UD. Nez says sup Mr. L-Dog. Martin Dorfler says, do you think Fury looks fit? I think he looks a bit run down. Well, it wouldn't surprise me if he is a bit run down. I mean, all the comments that he's always making about he has to train relentlessly, and that helps him stave off his sort of mental health issues. I mean, I wondered ahead of the first fight, after training for, what was it, a year or 18 months or whatever it was, almost continuously, if he was a bit run down then. And I know that there's been some talk that they've been trying to make him have Sundays off and all that sort of stuff, but that he says it makes him feel down, and he doesn't like being stuck at home and not doing something that he but the body's got to recover. So I mean, I thought when I've seen him this week, I thought he looks in pretty decent condition. But yeah, overtraining, it certainly is a risk, and especially for someone that looks to train so often. So Chupa Capra, oh god, I lost my place here. Apologies for that. I'll just try to scroll back up to that. So a lot of comments here. Sorry, I'll just so easy to get behind, but appreciate everyone who's leaving comments. We will get to them. We'll crack through it. Found my place. So Chupa Capra says, let's go champ Wilder on points. Punch quote, Wilder late stoppage. Lubak says, if Wilder's struggling to land his right hand after 6 rounds, he might get... Okay, you've just trailed off there. You've left me wanting more. But if you leave a comment now on what was there, I'll probably get to it in about 20 minutes. AB says, as much as I hate to say it, Wilder by knockout. Ness has got Fury by split decision. KO is just a gift. AZ says, L-Dog, hi you Kiwi spy. Luke says, I want Fury to win, but I think Wilder wins in the early to mid rounds. Rahowa says, if the fight hasn't been Jekylled, Fury by KO. Yeah, this talk of the KO, I mean, I know that he's been talking about 2 rounds, etc. And to me, that just seems like fantasy, but just based on the balance of probabilities in his career and the way that he's looked to fight. But I guess he's with a different trainer, Sugar Hill, so if he really does come forward and looks to try really crack Wilder, back him up, maybe make it a bit of an inside fight, it could be a completely different kettle of fish to how most of us are sort of thinking about it, and it would be quite dramatic too. I think it would be really interesting. I could see that in spots, but yeah, I think the first few rounds Fury will just test the waters, look for openings, and it wouldn't surprise me as well, and I covered this in my 10 things to watch for video, if we see a bit of Fury going southpaw, just to sort of confound Deontay Wilder. But he needs to do something a bit different from the first fight, because Wilder's already had 12 rounds of it, and we saw in the final 3 rounds, round 9 and then round 12, that he managed to clip Fury. So eventually he was working Fury out to some extent. So Fury will need to mix up the tactics a bit, because if he does more of the same, it's going to make it easier for Wilder to catch up with him. So L-Dog says, BT Sports always does a great job with their YouTube content. Yeah, done a lot of great adverts and a lot of sort of creative stuff as well. That's, good chuckling with the toy with the one with the kid, and it's made to sort of look like an 80s advert. That was quite fun. So Bob Aram is on the huff and puff, says AB. He could be. Or maybe I should say he is. So Cash for Cat says he thinks it does 1 million buyers. So Lubak says Sconia's put Wilder down for 15 seconds in a small fat heavyweight ranked outside the top 400. Isabella says, morning boxing squared. I don't understand why they Fury Wilder are saying AJ is relevant. They need to fight him to say they're the best of this era. Do you agree, boxing squared? I think some of why they're saying that is a precursor to the third fight. This trilogy's being lined up, and if they can try to minimize Anthony Joshua to an extent and make out that they're number 1, 2, and that's not really up for debate, then they're trying to sell that narrative for the third fight, that we have to see it no matter the result of the second fight. But the trilogy fight does hinge to some extent on what happens, because if one of them gets blown out in a round, well, do we need to see it again? But I do think that they do need to both fight Anthony Joshua to answer that question, who is the best of the generation? And wouldn't it be great if we had a bit of a round robin in the next few years? But the longer this goes on, the more I don't see it happening. Yeah. So L-Dog says he hopes this fight does 2 million pay-per-view buys. Sounds like you've been drinking Bob Aram's Kool-Aid there. AB says... Aram is smoking crack. Punch quote, 50 million guarantees. They are going to need well over 1.2 million pay-per-views compared. Floyd Mayweather Jr. got 95 mil versus Canelo on 2.2 million pay-per-views. Yeah, the whole... But that's the American pay-per-view money, and then there's going to be the UK pay-per-view international money. There'll be some other streams of revenue, but whatever the number, to make it up to 50 million guarantee, it's a lot of money. So Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News says BT have taken a slight hit because if you use Virgin Media in Ireland, you can't purchase it, and Virgin Media is Ireland's biggest network. They cut ties with BT recently. So Chupacabra says, breaking news, Dillian Whyte said Deontay's wife is his side piece. Yeah, the whole beef with Wilder and Whyte ongoing, and yeah, I didn't have the energy just to do a video on that this week when it sort of reared up again, because it's kind of the same thing, different day. It'd be good to see, I mean, if Wilder keeps winning, he's got that belt, or even Fury if he wins in the trilogy, for Dillian Whyte to get a shot against one of them, to, you know, maybe you can end some of this talk, because after a while it becomes a little bit, I know some people really are big Dillian Whyte fans and really feel aggrieved for his situation, but I sort of look at it as he's had opportunities he's turned down because of money reasons, and he went other directions, and some of it at some point just does become hot air, and not just on his side but also on Wilder's side. You know, they both say things and I'm just like, wow. So True says Fury has the same KO percentage versus Cans as Wilder. He just stopped fighting Cans and fought Klitschko. AZ says, Boxing Squid, what's your prediction for Martin versus Washington? I've got Martin KO. So I did cover that earlier, so apologies, I'm still catching up on the chat. Yeah, so I've got Martin winning, either by points or stoppage. Washington's a shot. I think the only way that Washington's going to win is probably by knockout. Chupacabra at Martin on points. Let's go, champ. George Michael says, I predict 680,000 buys at $70 a pop, which is solid. Anything over is very good. I think it's $79.99. So, yeah, 680,000 buys. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, I've sort of been a little bit over the map. I'm sort of thinking somewhere between 500,000 and 700,000. Maybe, so we'll just say 600. And if it does do 600, that's pretty good in this day. The sort of market in the United States these days for pay-per-view. Wasn't it the Pacquiao and Thurman one? I think 525,000. And is this fight that much bigger than that one? I don't know. AB says, I think Fury retires if he loses. It'd be interesting to see what both guys do and how they react, because they both talk a big game, but losing to the other, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that sort of plays out, what that sort of pushes them to do. Lubuck says, I hope Parker fights Hunter later this year. Good fight. JPK World says, hi. Hello to you too. Ringside Stories, what happens if Wilder loses? The trilogy fight. I just can't see with him and his pride, and especially if it's a points loss, I think he'll be like, you know, I've got every opportunity to get my belt back. Eddie says, I hope Parker fights a top-rated fighter this year. Was third and final fighter on his Matchroom deal is, after the Winters one. So he's getting paid pretty big money to fight tune-ups at the moment. So, you know, nice work if you can get it. But for his sake and his stock, he needs a big fight. L-Dog says, the winner of Wilder Fury needs to fight Christopher Lovejoy. Yeah, Lovejoy, the boxing enigma. Was he world number 440 something? 19-0, 19 knockouts, faced one guy with a winning record. He's a character on social media. I've got to give him that. So Punch Quote says, George Michael, 700 pay-per-view won't cover their 50 million in guarantees. Needs a lot of pay-per-views to cover those guarantees, but yeah, whatever the case, there'll be revenue coming in from elsewhere. But I did hear on another podcast someone sort of saying that this fight was going to be a loss leader, and I was like, but for what? For another fight or what? So the finances, I don't know how they're going to make it work regardless, because it sort of seems like you need a massive number no matter what. So Kurt says, aren't they already signed off for a rubber match? Yep, they certainly are. AB says Joyce will cause Dubois a lot of trouble. I can see that, but that's good. I'm hoping to see that. Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News. Do you think Aram's comments regarding if we rely on a face-off to sell the fight comes down to pride He obviously can't publicly admit it. He needs more needle to the casual, considering his huge pay-per-view. Yeah, I think Bob Arum's just spinning it for Bob Arum's purposes. I mean, he had that whole... there was his president, who was also quoted in the same article by Dan Raphael, and they sort of... their comments were somewhat at odds, and I completely agreed with Todd DeBoeuf in terms of his comments that the face-off is a valuable tool. It's sort of the pinnacle or the final sort of bit of the promotion. And if they did have a really intense, 2-minute face-off, you would have seen highlights of that somewhere. I mean, in the day before their fight, getting it in front of casual audiences' eyes on ESPN, Fox, that sort of stuff, and especially if there was a bit more pushing, or there had been a bit of a flare-up at the face-off after the weigh-in, it could have been just really good publicity. But now that the commission has said no face-off, maybe they can make this work for them in another way. Could be. Lubuck says Joyce will walk straight into those Dubois bombs. Well, it'll be interesting to see, one, if he does, but two, how many can he take? He's got a decent chin, but not too many people can stand up to Daniel Dubois' punches. But this Joyce is certainly well better than anyone Dubois has faced. No offense to anyone Dubois has faced, but he's a cut above Nathan Gorman, and he's already proven that through the Jennings win. So it's not just going to be some sort of knockover job, and if he does blast him out in a couple of rounds, it's an excellent performance by Daniel Dubois. So L-Dog says, a lot of people are jumping on the Dubois hype train. I can't see Dubois beating Hrgovic, Yoka, or Jalolov, to be honest. Yeah, it's interesting because people sort of forget in 2018 when he faced Kevin Johnson, a lot of people turned pretty dirty on him quickly after, Dubois went those 10 rounds with him and looked, one-paced and didn't really seem to have any ideas to sort of break him down. So, yeah, I mean, maybe some of the hype is outstripping the achievements. I mean, some of these belts that he's picked up have been against sometimes subpar opposition. I mean, let's face it, Tete and Kyotaru Fujimoto, they're food for anyone in the heavyweight division in the top 30. And there's just some of those fighters that are around that cling on to rankings and sort of on the fringe of the division for years and years and years, and all of a sudden they get that cash out fight, they take it. So I think Warren's been investing and paying some of these guys money that they haven't obviously been able to get elsewhere, hence why they've been able to, they've taken the fights against Dubois. So probably was a career high payday for Fujimoto, definitely for Tete, and definitely for Lati. Yeah, I mean, he's packed full of talent, Daniel Dubois, but the hype probably is outstripping the actual body of work at the moment, although, he's got all these belts behind him at the moment. So Ness says Dubois needs Joyce's fight to chin check and to have adversities, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, he needs some tough, hard, incredible fights, because on the, when he does get to the top level, if he doesn't have some of that behind him and maybe overcome some adversity, he may not be able to deal with it when he comes across it. And you don't want to sort of see a situation where he sort of, is left without having answers. He's not able to adjust in the ring, hasn't got the experience to deal with it. Chupacabra says Hrgovic is the next champ. Well, not at the rate that he's able to get meaningful fights. Sort of seems like him and a number of other guys are treading water at the moment. So JPK World says, did you hear that Eddie Hearn thinks Dubois will stop Joyce and he thinks it'll be like the Gorman fight? Yeah, it could be. I mean, it definitely could end up happening like that. But I think Joyce is going to have more success than Gorman did. Joe Joyce has actually got, a couple of inches on Daniel Dubois, and he's got a decent reach, whereas Nathan Gorman, with his T-Rex reach, he just was falling short. He was trying to be aggressive, and he was continually throwing a left hook because he's only got, a 73-inch reach or whatever it is. It's not great. He was just falling short all the time, and he didn't have the athleticism to close the distance on Dubois. So if he'd have landed some of those left hooks, maybe the fight would have lasted longer. Maybe it would have panned out a bit differently for Gorman in terms of the way that it went. But yeah, I think those two, it's a different comparison through the height, the reach. Yeah, Joe Joyce has got more tools than Nathan Gorman. So Punch Quote says, Joe Joyce too wide, Daniel Dubois just has to throw straight punches, KO in Daniel Dubois' favour. Yeah, but I don't think we're just going to see Joe Joyce standing right in front of Daniel Dubois. I think some people are thinking, he's going to just stand there and trade, and there might be a bit of that at times in spots, but I think we're going to see Joyce on his bike. I think he's going to be moving. He's with Ismail Salas again, his first trainer. There was some evidence and signs in those early fights where Joyce was using the ring to his advantage and making the most of the ring in terms of how to utilize it. And against Daniel Dubois, I mean, how many times has he faced anyone who's been on the move? Not really. Most of the guys have been just standing right in front of him. I mean, I remember Razvan Kajanu, and it was almost like similar to the Gerald Washington strategy against Adam Kovnatsky. Instead of using his height and his reach and trying to be defensively responsible, he just decided, well, I think I can bang out Daniel Dubois, and it just went horribly. So if Joyce thinks he's just going to stand in front of Dubois and trade with him and get the better of him, it's asking to be knocked out. It's asking to be hurt. I mean, I'm not saying that he can't do it, but I think we're going to see a Joyce who's really utilizing movements, and that might be something that Daniel Dubois is not really prepared for. So Kurt says Fury 6'9" wearing jandals. Ness says Hrgovic is too much for Dubois now, not yet. Lubak says everyone hyped up a Jagba until his last fight. Not necessarily his last fight. I mean, because remember, there was the Ali Aaron Demirjian fight, and that went 10 rounds. There was almost 2,000 punches. That was a great test for Jagba, but I think my take on him is that now that we've seen more of him at a better level, it's clear that he's still very raw and needs more work, but he is getting better. But I think in some ways, because he got knocked down against Iago Kaladze, it's one of these things where people have almost gone the other way. Kind of like after the Johnson fight with Daniel Dubois, a lot of people just, left the hype train, and they needed to see, a bunch of stuff in 2019, including the Kajanu and Gorman wins before they came back. It's probably going to be like that with the Jagba, but because some of the hype has left the building for him, that's perfect, because there's less scrutiny and people have more realistic expectations, at least for now. So L Dog says 6'9" wearing high heels. Down to stamina late. Well, I think in the first fight, the problem for Wilder on the stamina front was not because he wasn't ready for the 12 rounds, it was because he was finding fresh air with so many of his punches. So if he's more considered with his output, as he was in the Luis Ortiz fight, I don't think stamina will be an issue for him, and we know he carries his power, so he's going to be waiting for those opportunities. But it'd be interesting to see if there is more back and forth, because remembering the first fight, it was pretty low volume. I mean, people always remember the knockdowns and the drama of the 12th round, but while it was a really intriguing fight, it wasn't like there was a lot of punches thrown, and some of the rounds, were being shaded by Fury by a few punches on the CompuBox stats. So yeah, I think it could be relatively low volume again. I mean, maybe there will be some booing after a few rounds. I don't know. It depends on this. If Fury really does deliver on this, he's going to be more aggressive. So L-Dog says, I know this is asking for a bit, but I wish they put Yoka versus Ajagba on the co-main. I did see that Tony Yoka had said on Instagram that he's soon to announce his next fight. Kurt says, Lovejoy, the people's champ. He's entertaining, that's for sure. So 67 in the chat, so if you can smash that like button, that would be much appreciated. Thank you for joining him here, wherever you are, morning, noon, or night. Hope you're well. As I was saying earlier, I was a bit delayed getting to the stream tonight just because I went out for a walk and chanced my arm on the weather, and it ended up pelting down. And as an aside, the wind got up so much where I was walking that was exposed. I was battling with my coat to sort of keep my headphones on, and part of the headphones fell to pieces. So and it's the part where you charge it, so it's completely stuffed now, so I have to get another $20 set to go walking again with it. So True says, don't get how you can enjoy the big fights without a bet. Adds so much extra and keeps me from dropping to sleep at 5 a.m. Well, for me, the fights aren't at 5 a.m. So that Wilder Fury fight, it's going to kick off about 5 or 6 p.m. Sunday night for me. I've just never really been much of a sports bettor. But, I mean, given I run a heavyweight boxing channel, it doesn't take much, to keep me interested in the fights. I'll watch something, that happens outside. If someone starts the fight, I'll be out there having a look. Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News says, L-Dog, that's not asking much. It's a huge event. Having 2 prospects as the co-main, in all honesty, is a huge opportunity for them. AB says, Joyce has a chin, does Dubois? It's a good question. We're going to find out, hopefully. Eddie says Dubois' chin has not been tested yet. We've seen a little bit in the Lati fight. He took a couple of shots at one point, backed up, reset. He's like, oh, I felt that one. But hopefully we see. We need these questions answered before Daniel Dubois goes to the world level, because if he does and he's not fully tested, and we, maybe the hype has outstripped the actual what he's delivered in the ring. So this is a really solid test for him. And for Joyce, it's obviously a must-win, because if he loses, where does he go? Eddie says could be hiding some glass. Ringside Stories, they will not put a Jagba at risk after that Kaladze fight. Yeah, I think they're going to put him on ice for 2020. He will end up having some more tests. I think at a similar level that he has been fighting, there'll just be more of them. True says Fury is the favourite now, by the way. Lee says, given Fury got up last time, should the ref not take that into account this time if Wilder puts him down? Well, you'd hope so. Hopefully it's not waved off, straight away if there is a knockdown. And it's, Reese, as I mentioned earlier, said that because Fury had been a champion, or was the lineal champion as well, he took that into account, that he didn't want to be premature. And that will spark massive controversy, and I'm sure Bayless knows that, but he's got to call it as he sees fit. So hopefully, good fight, no controversy. And Chupacabra says, what if it's a draw? First time in history you get 2 back-to-back draws. Well, let's hope not. Lubak says, Arslan Bek Makhmedov will have a breakthrough year. Possibly. I'm interested to see what happens with Makhmedov. He's sort of done an Instagram post similar to Tony Yoka, sort of teasing that there's some fight news coming soon. I sort of think he's outgrowing the Canadian scene. Obviously, he's, about 10 fights deep now. They're struggling to get him the sort of fights he needs to move into next. There's no point sort of matching him with the sort of Samuel Peters of the world at this point. It needs to be someone who's a bit fresher and got a bit more. He needs guys that are tough and durable, and that are going to go some rounds. But, that's easier said than done when you've got a massive puncher throwing bombs away at you. True says, Bayless won't stop it early after the first fight. I hope not. Angus says, Man Boxing Squared, you're going late, bro. It's only 11:15. You must have left that comment a little while ago now. So the live streams normally will start at about 9:30. I was a bit late tonight, got caught out in the weather on a walk, had to take shelter. But you're getting back to Makhmedov, so hopefully there is some progression this year, because I wouldn't like to see him just tread water with the same sort of opposition this year. Remembering he's like 30 now, so it's not like he can just have this extended prospect phase, and he's clearly ready for much tougher tests than he's been given. George Michael says Arslanbek Makhmedov will chuck Wilder out of the ring with a flying elbow kick, maybe. And Unger, he says Wilder too quick for Makhmedov. Interesting with the offer that Makhmedov threw out there, $20 million for a Deontay Wilder fight in Montreal. It seems that wouldn't be enough money to entice Wilder now, even if it was really a serious offer. Kurt says Washington the Godslayer. Isabel says, do you think there should be a trilogy fight, and if AJ wins his next fight, Fury Wilder should fight next? Well, I think at this point there's just the trilogy fight. We can't get away from it. Irrespective of what I think it's going to go ahead. If it was a first round knockout, hopefully the loser would go, okay, I'm not going to take the trilogy. But I think, as Fury sort of said, there's too much money in it now not to take it. George Michael says Fury threw Wilder across the floor. Makhmedov will lift Wilder up and throw him to Breland. When Wilder fights Makhmedov, he'll be 36, so slow. Yeah, I think there is a case that, we're seeing prime Wilder years at the moment, that it'll be interesting to see. He talks about wanting to fight to 40, but I think by the time, if he's still fighting by 40 in 5 and a bit years, he'll have a number of losses on the record. This is the next year, maybe year and a half, probably the sort of end of prime Wilder as we know it. He's always going to be a danger with the power punching, but the older you get, his body, I mean, like any fighter, after 35, the reflexes and the athleticism start to just ebb away a bit. And most of the best heavyweights in the division, especially over time, there are exceptions to the rule though, have done their best work before the age of 35. So Prime Chisora versus Prime Wilder. No one really wants to fight him, but what are they offering these guys to fight up in Canada fight where it was, real bruising and low blows, all sorts of stuff? Isabella says, did you watch the Fury documentary on ITV in England? Great watch. No, I haven't seen that. Victor says, Wilder will beat Tyson Fury. Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News says, am I the only one who thinks Washington gonna KO Martin? I could totally see that result. That Helenius fight proves that, when he does land and he just hit the mark, he can make things happen. George Michael, I think Gerald will have real moments of success, still backing Martin, though. Yeah, well, this is a 50-50 fight. I mean, it is. I'm picking Martin. I just think he's probably going to wear Washington down a bit. He is durable, and I think Martin will want it to be a fight where it's up close and personal as opposed to Washington on the outside jabbing away and trying to throw long right hands. I mean, Washington, if he really does have his mind right, and it just always seems to be a bit of a question with him. Ness says, Martin have a decent chin. Kurt says, are people calling Fury furry on purpose? It's pretty funny. I see that all the time. I don't know if that's autocorrect. I just kind of just read over it now. It just seems to be something I, don't even really sort of see anymore. Okay, I lost my place in the chat there. Apologies for that. I've just got to scroll back up. There's a lot of comments here. So we've got 69 in the chat. Thank you for joining the chat here. Okay, back to where I was. Apologies if you left a comment and I haven't got to it. Slowly working my way down the chat. 58 people watching and 24 likes. Smash that like button, says L-Dog. Yes, please. So what happened to the regular Friday streams? Well, it's Friday. It's the first one for the year, and I'll be looking to do them, every Friday or most Fridays from now on, now that I've picked it back up for the first one for the year. So Stacks on Deck says, off topic, but AJ's going to have to drop a belt or defend them both. I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, we're going to get some clarity in the next week or two. It's not going to surprise me if they end up working out some sort of step aside, Usyk getting paid millions. Lubuck says, the Liberals will call to ban boxing if Wilder and Fury cause emotional stress and hurt. Michael says, thank you for the content, Boxing Squared. Martin vs. Washington will be a good fight. I think it's evenly matched and Martin will have Manny Robles in his corner. He's going to win like a god. He's been working with Manny Robles for a while now, so they have a decent little relationship going. So, I think that's a good combo. So, DeQuavius Johnson says, I think Wilder got a KO Fury. Yeah, that seems to be one of the results that is most popular at the moment. So, it's just such a fascinating and well anticipated fight here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the adjustments from the first fight. I know that they're saying in the Wilder camp, we're not changing anything, we're just doing it better, but that could be a ploy as well. So True says, why don't you have your camera on? Are you in your pajamas? Well, I don't have a webcam. I have a display screen, so there is no camera. George Michael says, Fury's the same old G. Fury inside 3 by TKO stoppage or intervention. John Potter, please, Wilder by KO. Jason says, Fury isn't overtrained this time. Fury will box the same, but put more jam on his punches later in the fight. Kurt says, confirmed B is streaming naked. Jens says, with Fury anything can happen. I just hope that he's mentally right and he he meets up fit, sharp, without injury, so we'll get a good fight, and he won't get caught early or at all for that matter. James says, if Fury wins by second round KO, I'm going to start... Okay, I'm not going to finish the rest of that one. You can find that comment at your leisure, people. But it involves James going to pick up a bottle of Fury's Easy Stroke. So Rob Plant says, what's up, mate? How's it going? It's not bad. It's Friday night here, a couple of days out from the fight. Looking forward to it. So Unga says, at James Burrell, are you cutting down? David says, I think Fury is washed up. He's not as elusive as he was. You can't binge on booze and coke for 2.5 years, lose 10 stone in weight without taking its toll. On top of that, he's getting older. Yeah, that's true. I mean, and maybe he's not as good as he once was. I mean, maybe peak Fury was, 2015 versus Vladimir Klitschko around that time. But does he need to be peak Fury to beat Deontay Wilder, who's not exactly a technical master or anything? He's a guy, though, that's got massive power. And if he catches you, it can be all over. So Benjo says UK pay-per-view will be tiny as it's 5 a.m. It'll be interesting. I think someone quoted Eddie Hearn as saying he thinks maybe 200,000 because of the time. But it all adds up. Buddy Aces says, what do you think about Ruiz versus Ortiz? That was a topic on my list that I wanted to talk about, so I'm glad that you raised it. I think it's a great fight, if it happens. If that is the fight that Andy Ruiz is walking straight into, then fantastic fight. And I would pick Ruiz to win it. And he knows he's got to come in much better shape. And I think a fresher Andy Ruiz Jr., who does have a great chin, is going to be putting pressure on Luis Ortiz, his 40-year-old legs. And part of me thinks as well, especially if Deontay Wilder wins against Tyson Fury, and if he keeps winning, they need to have a conveyor belt of options of guys for him to fight in the future. And there's a lot of stuff tied up in a potential fight with Andy Ruiz Jr. I think Ruiz Jr. would end up jumping the queue in front of Adam Kodnatsky, who is clearly waiting for his shot. So Eli says, what part of New Zealand are you from? I'm from the Wellington area. Jason says, Wilder vs. White, Wilder vs. Joshua. It's all tiresome and boring. Hopefully it happens. Yeah, that's my take on it. I mean, it just ends up going around in a circle. I mean, we've been talking about Joshua and Wilder since, April 2018. I mean, L-Dog says, Dillian White sounds like a salty hater at this point. That being said, I can understand his frustration. So Eli says, don't say North or South Island. I'm a Kiwi and glad there's a dope channel for the sport. Yeah, well, North Island, Wellington area. Kurt says that White should be salty. True says, Fury knows exactly what Wilder will do, but Wilder won't have a clue what to expect. Unga says, Wilder, White beef getting quite nasty, a lot of personal stuff. So apologies if you've left comments. I must be about 20 minutes behind, so I'm going to really try crack into it and catch on. If you're in Ireland and your network is Virgin, you can't buy the pay-per-view. Sure, there's going to be some way around it. Not sure what that is. I'm sure someone will let you know. Benjo says, there are even hardcore boxing fans refusing to pay for the fight here in the UK because we're fed up with Wilder's racism and ducking behaviour. 5 a.m. doesn't help either. So Ness says 400,000 buyers to 550,000 pay-per-view buyers in his opinion. Neon says, hi there to you too. True expects 500,000. Jason says, Fury puts Black versus White to bed, race baiting. He kind of handled that quite nicely at the press conference because, I mean, I don't think this fight is about race, and neither should it be. This is two of the three best heavyweights in the division, and they're fighting. It's not about, which race they are. It's about who's better, and they'll, look to prove it on fight night. So Neon says, hey, I have a question at the beginning of your videos. Is that your mug? Yes. So, that's in every single intro. So that is me. Obviously, the photo's a couple of years old now. There's a few more. Since that time, there's a few greys starting to come into the bottom of the sort of bottom of the beard, more than I'd like, but it is what it is. Jen says, I hope Ruiz versus Ortiz gets made. It will determine how I rate Wilder's wins versus Ortiz and how AJ's loss/win versus Ruiz. I have growing feeling that Ortiz is overrated, but if he beats Ruiz, he is not. Yeah, I mean, if the fight gets made, there is those sorts of questions. I mean, I just hadn't expected that fight, Ortiz would get matched hard until Deontay Wilder loses. Because a lot of Deontay Wilder's legacy is tied up in Luis Ortiz, if you see what I mean, with the two best wins being Ortiz. So if he was beaten up by Andy Ruiz, it certainly does take the edge off. So I was sort of thinking there'll be no hard fights for Luis Ortiz until Wilder loses. And that may be the case. I don't know. We'll see. So David says Parker will do nothing as long as he sticks with Kevin Barry. Well, Kevin Barry's not making the fights, so it's not his fault. Ruiz smokes Ortiz if he's anywhere near fighting shape. See him against Parker. Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News. It's still... okay, that's the pay-per-view issue that they're having. Fury Wilder is a dress rehearsal for Grandpa's Bob and Uncle Al to see if they can do Spence Crawford. But is Spence Crawford bigger than Wilder Fury? I don't know. I mean, I'm not convinced. Rob Plant, okay, still talking about the pay-per-view there, issue. Scatty Batty. At first I was worried about Fury's subdued demeanour in the presser, but after watching the doc last night, clearly his dad is opposed to all the circus and has probably tactical. Yeah, it could be an element of that. Maybe wanting Deontay Wilder to get a little overconfident. So Jade Louise Tidman says, I wonder if there's no face-off. Is it a ploy? The host was very biased to Wilder. Also, I don't think they want Fury in Wilder's head rent-free. Well, you might be there already, so that, Jason says, if Dubois knocks Joyce out in 4, I'm turning into a meerkat. Frank put Dubois in too early because he's short of cash flow. He's going to become much more important to Frank Warren in the next couple of years. Obviously, signing him to a massive 5-year extension. Must have been paying him good money, confirmed money in his contract, because that is a lot of money. A lot of money. A lot of years. And sorry, we don't know though. I was just looking at something else. Trailed off there. A lot of years and probably a lot of money. So Red Eye Jedi 420 UK, Dubois has youth, Joyce has experience and isn't a slouch, but I can see Dubois taking Joyce out round 8 or 9. Yeah, I could see any of these sorts of results. I mean, it's hard to call. I mean, we know Dubois has got massive talent, but how good is he really? We've kind of got a barometer for Joe Joyce, and maybe that's somewhere between top 15 and top 25. We need to see more. I mean, what did Bryant Jennings have left when he faced him? But yeah, Joyce certainly has got a better win and has maybe faced some better opposition overall than Dubois. But that doesn't mean that Dubois is a slouch, and it doesn't mean Dubois is not going to put on a clinic. Obviously, ahead of the Gorman fight, we were sort of thinking, how good is Nathan Gorman? How good is Daniel Dubois? Dubois was still expected to win, but it ended up being a landslide. So Rob says he predicts the fight will get 800,000 buyers in the US and UK combined. So L-Dog says Hrgovic could end up a victim of boxing politics. Could be a number of guys that, depending on the politics of the sport, the stables, and even in-house politics, there could be a number of guys that kind of don't get the sort of fights that they sort of need. I was thinking about, actually, and this is a Dillian White fighter, Alan Babbage. He's coming back up on a card in Italy on the 28th. He announced that. And I was thinking about that, and that's not the first time he's been in an Italy card. It kind of ends up being guys that do fill certain positions. They're sort of at a certain tier on the totem pole, and that's their place. And for some guys, it might be hard to sort of shake that. the tag they might be getting, in terms of there's so many shows that need to be filled, and guys have certain slots that they want to advance to. But if you have guys like the that are not necessarily say co-main event guys, they're sort of mid-card type guys, it might be harder to sort of sneak up above that level with all the talent that's sort of going around at the moment in the different silos. It'll be interesting to see. Hrgovic, definitely has got the ability to sort of get to co-main event sort of status soon, but will he be given the opportunities to get there? And that's the problem him and guys like Martin Bacoli have at Matchroom at the moment. So L-Dog says, because Filip is from Croatia, he doesn't have a large financial backing, unlike Daniel Dubois. As a result, sanctioning bodies will favour Dubois. I mean, there's a little bit in that, but I do think that, there's going to be some guys, where the talent's shining through and you get the wins, that you're going to sort of transcend some of that. But I think time might be the issue here, that we want to see some of these things happen yesterday, but it takes longer. So Hrgovic has still got years of his prime left, and maybe Eddie Hearn is comfortable letting him sort of, just have this period where he's still building his record, even though he wants to go higher and faster than is happening. He might just end up having another 12 to 18 months of doing much of what he's been doing, having some of those Eric Molina level fights. So Right Hook Boxing says he's got to head off. Great stream, mate. All the best. So thank you for joining Right Hook Boxing. I think he left about 20 minutes ago, so shows that I'm very behind here. Apologies for that if you've left a comment. Okay, just skipping down the comments here. L-Dog says he's disgusted how much Filip has been screwed over this year. Tommy Temper says both guys will be heavier for this fight. Fury will pace himself better, in my opinion. Yeah, the weight question, sure, it's going to be answered soon, but it was interesting. Wilder spoke about being 230 when he's been waking up, and he thinks he'll come in high 220s. Fury's took 270 that he'll weigh in, and I was looking at Fury and I was like, is he really 270? And I was thinking he looks more like 260, but it can be really hard to tell. And with Wilder, I didn't think he looked 230, because I remember Wilder when he was 230 and he was looking very buff upstairs, like a bit of a light bulb. Obviously he's got relatively thin legs by comparison to his upper body, but he was really jacked when he was at sort of 228, which was his highest weight. And I don't see him looking like that. I think maybe it is going to be somewhere around 220, 222. So Hudson says, hello mate, hello to you too. So I'm just trying to pass through the people having conversations, so apologies, I will get to the comments. So Unga says, if someone starts a fight outside, I'll have a look. Yeah, I totally would. I mean, there's been some drama on my street in the last few weeks. There was some guy, he said he fell asleep when he was driving, clipped a people mover right outside my house, and then he mounted the curb, went over a little and down a little bank type front lawn and crashed into a tree, and the people mover was absolutely munted. And then like a couple of nights later there was a police chase which ended right outside again, and there was like 7 cop cars. It was mayhem, and I was out there and taking photo and video, and it was the same cops, some of them that were there from the crash from the couple of days before it was all happening. But yeah, there's some interesting things that happen around here sometimes. Joyce might actually be the scariest looking boxer since Iron Mike. Is that said with some sarcasm there? I'm not sure. He might be one of the nicest boxers in the heavyweight division. Genuinely seems like a really nice guy, Joe Joyce. So Cash for Cat says he's here in Thailand. All the big fights are on Sunday, 9 a.m. all. Yeah, it's sort of, I mean, you just kind of get used to viewing certain things at certain times. Like all the big fights that are in UK or US, either in the morning for the UK for me on a Sunday, or afternoon, early evening if they're from the US. Depends if they're in, say, Vegas, it's more around dinner time, 5, 6 p.m. Or if it's in New York, it's like 2, 3 p.m. So which is, I find it fantastic. So Jim says that he's missed the live streams. Yeah, first of the year. Welcome back, Jim. So 62 in the chat. So wherever you are, morning, noon, or night. So thank you for joining me here. I was aiming to go for an hour or so, so I've well overshot, and I'm nowhere near finishing the comments, so we will keep cracking through them. I'll just check my list, actually. I had a bunch of things that I thought I'll raise during the chat. We have talked about some of them. The White Wilder beef, Ortiz and Ruiz, we've talked about that. Pay-per-views, the Wilder stuff, the Nevada State Athletic Commission face-off ban. Yeah, that seemed bizarre to me. The Joyce Dubois fight with another belt. Simon Keane and Daniel Martz, that's happening tomorrow. So tomorrow my time, it might be later where you are in the world. On your, it's in Canada. So that is, yeah, I'm interested if I can manage to catch that somewhere, because I didn't see that being on punchandgrace.com. So yeah, I'll be interested to see if I can manage to watch that live or even on replay, how Simon Keane looks, because he didn't look flash in that Liakovic fight. And Martz, yeah, he kind of falls down in a lot of fights and doesn't seem to have a lot of resistance. But Keane didn't exactly put on a show against Liakovic, and maybe there is a sniff of an upset here. I'm not expecting it, but there's the outside chance. I remember against Charles Martin, Martz actually did have a good round of success, and afterwards Martin was like, yeah, I had to kind of wake up after that round because I kind of switched off and ended up paying for it. AZ says, I don't think Bayless cares about controversy. Tupac says, much love from the UK, hope everyone is good. Lubak, if Joyce was dropped in the amateurs wearing head guards, then Dubois will stop him. Yeah, Joyce was actually stopped a few times in the amateurs. If you haven't checked out the Rise of video that I did for Joe Joyce, sort of tracking him from the amateurs to the pros, he actually did have a few stoppage losses in the amateurs, but you know, yeah, that video is up on the channel, so you can just search the Rise of Joe Joyce, say on Google, and that's going to come up. So Kurt says he wants to see a flying elbow kick and some 6-foot-inch nails. I did, yeah. When he said that, I just at the final press conference, the 6-foot-inch nails, that did crack me up. One of my other favourites from the first fight was when Wilder said in one of the media calls that he said his mind was as big as a spaceship, which you can interpret many ways. Okay, I got a whole bunch of people talking about streaming and stuff, so I will just skip past that. Lost my place again. I'm catching up, though. I'm catching up. So James Burrell says Wilder's baby mama thinks of Dillian White while the hillbilly is giving it to her. Should have screened that comment before I read that. Byron says, Byron from the UK, sorry late into the chat, what's your prediction for Wilder Fury 2? I'm going with Wilder. I mean, right from the outset when I did my first video when this was announced, I picked Wilder, not with any confidence. I just think on the balance of probabilities, he's been 12. He's probably going to have Fury's number, maybe a knockout second half of the fight. I don't know. I'm not confident in that at all. And if Fury wins, you know, and it's a great fight, whoever wins, if it's a great fight, that's good for boxing. I just want to see a good fight. A lot of back and forth chat about streaming and other bits and pieces, just sort of skipping past that. Sorry for the silence. So Sam with the super chat there, appreciate that, Sam. Cash for Cat says Usyk versus Chisora winner. Usyk, I would pick him in that. I actually, Usyk and Gassiev, these injuries that they've had, it is a little bit concerning, and I did a video on Patreon about a week or so ago, starting to get the speed wobbles with these two guys, and can their bodies hold up to the rigors of the heavyweight division? It's certainly a question. So Jade says, everyone smash the like button, easily the best discussion channel, much love BS. Thank you for that, Jade. JJ says, only on Boxing Squared, my favourite boxing channel, thank you for that. If you don't want to pay for pay-per-view and don't mind commentary in a foreign language, all you need to do... Okay, so more streaming advice there. So Jim, thank you for the super chat there. He says, thanks for all the years of great content. It's not too many years. I mean, I don't want to sound like I've been here for 15 or 20 years, but yeah, the channel is 2.5 years old. Yeah, so at the end of June, it'll be 3 years. So we're starting to get up to a milestone, and yeah, the subs are slowly climbing. So yeah, everyone who follows the channel regularly, listens to the content, I really appreciate it. And it keeps the channel going. So Robin Rickson says, I like the Ruiz versus Ortiz fight. It'll show exactly where each of them stand in the heavyweight division. Yeah, I mean, I agree to a point. There's the whole triangle theory doesn't always work, but sometimes you can get a good data point from certain fights about where other guys are at. And sometimes we get surprised as well. Ruiz versus Ortiz to face winner of Kovnatsky-Helenius. I think the Ruiz or Ortiz beats Adam Kovnatsky. He's a solid heavyweight, but I think his sort of ceiling, he's kind of at it. I think he can beat a Helenius, but I don't think he can beat top 10 guys. So L-Dog says his favourite boxers, Hrgovic, Parker, Milas, Farr and Ahil. And Peter Milas, he's been a bit of a ghost in the past year or so. Has had a little bit of injury he's been dealing with, but it is one of those things that he's had a lot of buzz and hype coming out of 2018 and hasn't really capitalised it in 2019. And he has indicated on social media he's got a fight announcement coming soon, so we'll see what happens. A similar situation for Vladislav Sorenko, a guy out of 2018 starting to build a bit of buzz and hype for himself. Just really hasn't had the opportunities or had I don't know. Some of these guys aren't with big promoters, and I always wonder if there is like a premium, that they have to almost pay before they can get to that world level because they are with a smaller outfit, if you know what I mean. Like if you're with a bigger outfit, you can get to the top a lot faster. Seems to be the way. I don't know. So AZ said Fury isn't 270. Unrivaled Boxing Talk and You says Fury's 258. Yeah, I could see something like that. 260. Somewhere around there. I just didn't think that he looked 270. I know he's been wearing some baggy clothes and it can be hard to tell, but if he's 270, maybe they are going to follow through with some of the strategy. But John Fury's always banging on about Tyson Fury, losing something when he gets below a certain weight. So Fraser said so much BS is being talked about this fight, weights, strategies, everything. There's a lot of mind games that go on. And Fury's obviously throwing out a lot of red herrings as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on the scale, because I could see both of them coming in 10 pounds lighter than they say that they're going to weigh, high, or 5 to 8 pounds lighter or so. So James Burrell says he thinks Fury looks very fit and Wilder is in for a long, embarrassing night. We'll see. That's what we thought we were going to get the first time, and obviously Fury, a couple of lapses, found himself on the canvas, and almost an extended stay on the canvas the second time around. AZ says, I think Wilder's eye might be closed by the end of the fight from jabs. Well, Johan Dorper was able to close Wilder's eye up, and what was that, 4 years ago? So, I mean, Fury is a much better boxer than Dorper, bigger reach, and he's got the reach advantage over Wilder. So if he can manage to pepper him with jabs and close up an eye, that'll be massive for him. James Burrell says Fury didn't have a full gas tank the first fight. He will throw a lot more punches this fight. And this fight's going to tell us as well, because a lot of people obviously after that first fight said Fury, he was 50%, 70%, 30%, but whatever it was, a lot of people thought he wasn't at his best. So I'm, picking that whatever we see here, this is Fury now for pretty much the rest of his career. This is just who he's going to be. And we may not like it, or we might go, actually, this guy looks pretty good. I mean, he had a bit of a sort of Jekyll and Hyde year in 2019. Looked fantastic against Tom Schwartz, even though Schwartz is what he is. And then looked a little bit pedestrian against Otto Wallen. That was even before the cuts. The reason the cuts came was because Wallen was able to open them up, and he was hitting Fury to the body. And I think Wilder needs to go to the body. And we saw him doing that against Luis Ortiz. I mean, when I was watching the Ortiz-Wilder rematch, I was like, is Wilder's hand broken or something, the right hand? He just wasn't really throwing it. But what he was doing was working and investing to the body with the left hook. And I think we could see a lot of that in this fight. And that's, going to be huge for Wilder to slow Fury down. Because if he can start chopping the tree down and then, slow him down and then knock him out later on, I could totally see it happening like that. But can Wilder fight to a disciplined game plan? That's the question. We saw it against Ortiz, but the thing with Ortiz was it's not like he was really forcing a torrid pace against Wilder. It was pretty sedate overall. But, we'll see. I think Tyson Fury's going to give Wilder some looks he's probably not expecting, and he's going to dictate the pace and the action at times. And when Wilder's in control in fights, it's generally when he's the one that is dictating, the pace of a fight. So Ellie Brass says, good morning, just tuned in. Thank you for joining us. And she says, so he or she, I'm not sure which one, says, love your channel. Thank you very much. So JJ says, okay, squared, no mucking around. Who you got, Wilder or Fury? Wilder. And that's not a confident pick, but that's what I said in my first video when it was announced, so I'm sticking with it. And Jamie says Wilder is cringeworthy but comical on the mic. Yeah, there is something about because you can tell. Just a sec. Bit of dust in my throat or something. You can tell when Tyson Fury starts going on off his little rants and that Wilder wants to match him, but something's not quite processing, and you end up with some of these funny little sayings like flying elbow kick or 6 foot nails or whatever it was. It certainly does add a little bit of interest to the press conference. Where were we? So 7-2 for a Wilder knockout, says Alibra. Jamie says, I look forward to the fight. I can't help but feel sorry for Americans having to pay $80 to see it, especially with how average the undercard is. The pricing out there is outrageous. Gotta agree, and I don't know how fans in America, and apologies if you're an American forced to pay this, put up with it, because it's highway robbery. It's $40 for me, and like say $150, so $80 is roughly, I think it's American, is 130 or 140 New Zealand dollars. So it's a lot, and I'm paying 40 New Zealand for it. So, and even I'm just like, man, that's that's a rip off. They put it up because it used to be $34.95, and it's only just gone up for this fight. So probably going to be a new price point in New Zealand now with some of these sorts of fights. Any international fight in the past few years, including UFC pay-per-views, it's just been $34.95 flat pricing on Sky Sports New Zealand. But yeah. So Kurt says, whether you're crying or laughing or cheering, Deontay is entertaining on the mic for sure. Yeah, I agree with that. JJ says, the biggest threat is Fury can make this a boring fight like the first 7 rounds of the first fight or his fight with Vlad. Yeah, if he can do that and manage to flummox Wilder and rack up some rounds, that's really going to put pressure on Wilder. And if he does try to, claw back some, because even though you can say, I only need a couple of seconds and then I can knock you out, what if those seconds aren't coming and you're not feeling like they're coming? It is going to be a situation you might have to start, pouring on a bit more pressure and, taking a few risks, and that could end up being advantageous for Fury. So Woka Sam says Usyk has no injuries now. That was fake news. No, his promoter said that his elbow was the elbow injury was they just wanted to give it more time, which if he was completely healthy, they wouldn't need to. So I'm not buying some of what with boxers, often we don't get the full picture on the injury front. The fact that we're made aware that there's an elbow injury means that it probably was decent and serious. Jamie says, I can't argue with the Kurt. I just wish he'd talk a bit less rubbish because it can be borderline delusional at times. Woka Sam says, Usyk is smart and tricky. After Bradis fight, he is really intelligent when boxing. So Jay Scovey says, Boxing Squared, love your channel, by the way. Watch every video you post. Thank you for that. How would you predict Otto Warren versus Luis Ortiz? Well, that's interesting because Otto Warren, similar to Luis Ortiz, but he's kind of like the fresher version with less power, I guess I'd want to say. It probably wouldn't be a great fight to watch, but would be an interesting fight, and I think Otto Warren would make Luis Ortiz work. He would really test Luis Ortiz's aging legs, and I could totally see Otto Warren racking up some rounds. But this whole Ortiz and Ruiz fight, if that comes off, that's a good barometer for both, because I don't know how much Ortiz has left, and the fact he hasn't fought anyone since he hasn't fought anyone but Deontay Wilder the past couple of years, anyone of note. It's hard to get a real read. He did fight Christian Hammer, and Hammer's a sort of top 30 guy, and Ortiz, he looked okay. He was getting hit by some hammer right hands. It wasn't a fantastic performance. But, it might have just been an off night for Luis Ortiz too. Fraser says, aside from themselves, who do you think is the biggest danger for Wilder and Fury? Who do you think can take out Wilder but Fury? Who do you think can take out Fury but Wilder? I think there's a whole bunch of guys that have a chance of beating both, but most of them will never get an opportunity, and that's the issue. And then we most of the time get forced into pretty average voluntaries or average mandatories, and it can be a real hit and miss thing in the heavyweight division. So Tin says some of the guys you've mentioned need co-promotional deals. Yeah, Makhmedov is someone who needs to be on a co-promotional deal. Kurt says probably Wallen's next fight will be a good indication. Yeah, no, I'm not convinced. Lucas Brown, I think he's pretty shot. I think Wallen's going to roll through him. Not because he's a massive puncher. I just think Brown's got nothing left in the tank. He'll be there for a good few rounds until he completely gasses, and Wallen is picking him apart, potential stoppage. Lubak says, great stream, catch you later again. Thank you for joining us. And Unger sort of echoing my sentiment, not Lucas Brown, completely rinsed. It will tell us nothing about Warren. Yeah, I largely agree. This is a stepping stone fight for Otto Warren. Obviously, they couldn't get the sort of fights that they were looking to get after his performance against Fury, which was a loss. They were looking to capitalize on that. There was he was in the conversation briefly for a Dillian Whyte fight, but obviously they couldn't get what they wanted, so they've had to put something together. This is a showcase fight for Otto Warren against Lucas Brown. Kurt says, is it Warren versus Brown? Yeah, March 28th, I think, on, is it Showbox? Something like that. So Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News says, what mic are you using? It is an Audio Technica 80 2020 USB mic. So it's at the lower end of the mics that have got good sound quality, if that makes sense. So it's not like a $500 mic or anything like that. It's $180 New Zealand, which is, I don't know, £90, something like that. So Benjo says, Freddie Roach explained that Tyson was very fit for the first time because his heart and lungs were trained for an obese body while losing weight rapidly. Now his CV system is trained for a lighter body. Well, if it has any effect on the fight, we'll soon see. Kurt says, Brown is completely gone. You're right about that. Good bloke Brown, though. Very sensitive on social media. I've been blocked all over the place by him. I was probably asking for it, though, when I said he was a knockout waiting to happen. But he was, and he got knocked out by Dave Allen. Tin says, I want Fury to win, but I've just got a feeling Wilder will KO him. Fury will win the third fight. If anything, just for the third fight, the best result to ensure that there's a big trilogy ending type fight is if Fury wins the second one. And I know I've said I'm picking Wilder, but from the point of view that we'd want to see it again, if he completely outclasses Wilder, or there's a lot of action but he still gets a decision or whatever, yeah, that sets up the third fight nicely. But if it's a Wilder KO in like 2 rounds, it may actually just extinguish any sort of interest from fans. So Plato's Cave says, nice videos on Parker on the Matchroom page. I haven't seen that. I saw that they posted something. Was it a day in the life or something like that? So Jim says, I think Fury stops Wilder this time. Big call. Steve says, we have other options like restaurants, bars, movie theatres. Usually a door charge like $20. I'm going to watch in a movie theatre, reclined leather chairs, big screen, $20. Now that's an option that if it was available where I was, I mean, and say theoretically if I wasn't, doing a channel that focused on heavyweight boxing and I wasn't covering the fight, I would be totally down to going to the movies to watch the fight. That would be fantastic. So Kurt says, I think it's $50 here in Australia. George Michael says, got to have faith. Usyk's elbow injury was dodgy because he was doing flying elbow kicks in camp. Got to watch that. Got to watch that. Where are we? Woker Sam asked, what is the flying elbow kick? It's a good question. I think someone should be doing a follow-up for Deontay Wilder, because that is like a patented wrestling move. If I've ever seen one, if he can, describe what it actually looks like, you could actually make that into something. Tin says, Martin vs. Washington, an interesting fight, but not a co-main event. Navarrete is a class fighter, but should be fighting higher opposition. Would have liked to have seen Marcus Brown and Albert Bell to add depth. Isn't Brown having a rematch with Pascal? That would have been a good fight to have as the co-main event. Unga says at Jay Scarvey, 2 southpaws. I'd pick Ortiz to outbox any southpaw. He'll put a beating on Warren. Jay Shine, you guys are paying $25 for your fight, and us Americans are paying $75 for good fights. Wilder vs. Fury is a good fight. We don't feel robbed. Wilder vs. AJ, I would pay $125 for it. It's just what it is. Yeah, I get what you mean. It's one of those things you end up just, because it's the reality of where you are, it's the cost. But you do get used to it. I know when I saw the other day that it's here in New Zealand, the international pay-per-view has gone up from $34.95 to $39.95. I was just like, what? Really? But I do remember, was it 3 or 4 years ago, the sort of outrage online that the UK pay-per-view was going from $16.95 to $19.95, and now we've seen that go from $19.95 for the Joshua Ruiz rematch, and that's followed suit with the Fury and Wilder rematch. So it's one of those things that just ends up happening. We got to pay the piper for these fights, or take a chance on a dodgy stream. That just seems to be the way it is. So Heavy D says, morning from the UK, do they sell 60-foot-inch nails near you? I'll have to check on that one, but that was one of the better quotes in their final press release. Unger says maybe so, but his brain isn't any slower. He still knows how to win. JJ says, Jay Shine, don't tell this to Al Heyman or Bob Arum. That's the $125 paper. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, actually. I remember Joseph Parker, Andy Ruiz in New Zealand. They totally reamed the New Zealand market. That was 60 New Zealand. I felt outraged about that. But if it ended up being something like $100 or $150 for, say, Wilder, Joshua, or Joshua Fury, I would be absolutely, seething about it. So Unger says Wallen won't break the top 40. He's been way overrated after the Fury fight. Yeah, I think his ceiling's a bit higher than top 40, but it is one of these things. I mean, and I did a video on it that, Otto Wallen is not an elite fighter. I mean, if he'd have beaten Tyson Fury, you can get into the conversation, but he lost that one, hasn't done anything since, and his best win was against Adrian Granat a couple of years ago, and Granat was, sort of fringe level, / prospect at that point. Good fight, good win, but, Wallen needs to get busy, and Brown probably will be the best win on his resume. And that's probably why it's been made too. He needs a bit more meat to actually get in the conversation for other fights, because it is only so long he can actually travel on the what was a loss to Tyson Fury. So Vizio says Martin will knock out Washington. Jason says Wallen will probably fight, is it Tomato Cans, which is a shame. He seems to be very quick. Benjo says maybe Wilder only understands the metric system. Vizio says there isn't a lot of hype here in the UK for Wilder vs Fury, especially since it will be shown at 5 a.m. in the morning. And to be honest, and I mentioned this earlier in the stream, not a lot of hype where I am as well. I mean, some of my normal indicators, like people that I know as casual sports fans that buy the odd pay-per-view and that sort of stuff when the fight's big enough, they're not. It's not even on their radar. So. But I guess, the real money's to be made in the United States with this $80 pay-per-view costs, and it seems to be getting pumped, on Fox and ESPN. So, yeah, we'll see what it does. Obviously, if it's a big number, very good for them, and probably ensures a trilogy fight happens no matter what. So, Woka Sam says you can watch it for free on VPN. Paul B says, you guys in the USA get to watch it prime time. We have to sit up until 5 a.m. in the morning, split the difference. Benjo says, I'm from the UK. They don't sell 6-foot-inch nails or hammers from Alabama either. Okay, so we're all caught up on the chat here. So 1 hour 58 into it, so I'll make some final comments about the fight this weekend. 58 in the chat. Thank you for joining me here on this live stream. We'll be looking to bring it back next Friday as well, and sort of crank it up into the year. I mean, part of the reason that I hadn't done it as well through January was there was no real fights to talk about for weekends, although, as I said earlier in the stream, there's been so much news around for heavyweights, but actually not a lot of fights, not at any sort of real level. So it's been quite, it's been different, I'll say that. But final thoughts on Wilder Fury. Let's hope that the judges aren't a factor in this fight. Let's hope the referee allows the fighters to do what we know and think they are capable of. Let's hope that it's a good fight and something that can reflect well for the sport of boxing. I'm picking Wilder, but it's not a confident pick. And, I don't mind who wins, and I hope it is a great fight, because at the end of the day, these are the sorts of fights that we follow the sport for. But yeah, I'll leave it on that note. But enjoy the weekend, enjoy the fight wherever you are. If you're up at 5 a.m. or if you're watching it prime time in the States, or if you're watching it on Sunday morning or afternoon in Asia or Australasia, just have a good one, have a good weekend, and we'll be back here next week. And there will be post-fight coverage, of course, on the channel, and I'm looking forward to it. Have a good night, wherever you are in the morning, noon, or night. Take care.